Is in a situation like this where people are trying to be social, when it's cold and below 5 below zero, it's very difficult to want to talk to other people, and this has very much affected what I think is going on regarding the news coming out of this city.
What news?
Yes, that's what
Where has the news
That's
been
what I'm saying. On the ground, we're not talking about people that are happy to be there. I think there's been a big time effect between the fact that people thought the Vikings were going to be in this game and the letdown locally for the fact that they're not. The vibe is just not what it would have been had Minnesota managed to make that game.
But that's in Minnesota. I mean, just nationwide, first of all, there's no controversy, which we're always criticizing the NFL. Why so much controversy? Now we can't get into it because there's no controversy. Not only that, it's a regional matchup. New England versus Philadelphia. What do you do if you're on the West Coast or in the Midwest? You're thinking, I don't even know these teams. Most people don't like the Patriots. I'm sorry, Patriots fans. People feel that way. But it's a tough one, right? It's a tough one to get into. And a guy from Philly, I keep waiting for people to be excited about it, but we just don't have the interest in this one. And what's really troubling is the ratings were down last year from the year before. You wonder how that affects things this year.
But the Eagles fans have bet it down to 4.5 points.
No, and I don't know what the irony is there in a guy from Philly talking about the Patriots not being likable. When it's not like Philly and Eagles fans have always been the most likable. And you look at that specific team, they've got the broad storyline of they're the underdogs, but specifically, there's not a lot to dig into there in the Philly team. I think the national media and the general casual fan looks at Philly and they're like, all right, I guess what's the storyline we have? They don't have Carson Wentz, so the storyline is the absence of a guy as opposed to them specifically knowing a lot of things about that team. And I've been to the previous 3 Super Bowls, and at pretty much every single one of them, and you touched on this, Ryan, there was a comment or a controversy that already existed. 4 or 5 years ago, it was talking to Alex Smith actually not having a podium at the game because Kaepernick had been replaced. Or there was the cornerback for the 49ers, his anti-gay comments. There just have been things that came out of that week that covered about a 2 or 3 day span that would be leading the news items of that week. And we don't have any of that. Maybe it's because people are taking pictures through their windows of what's going on.
Go outside.
At the snow, the most interesting fact of the week was about last year's Super Bowl. It came out in the New York Times just yesterday how Arthur Blank, owner of the Atlanta Falcons, told Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots, in this direct quote, that I was pissed off that there are 283 diamonds on every Patriots Super Bowl ring. That's the best fact of the week.
Rich guy problems.
Exactly. Billionaires fighting.
So into a news hole, and what news there was at the press conference, the State of the League address last week, or this past Wednesday, Roger Goodell asked this question by our good friend Jim Trotter, our colleague.
Why is the league having such a hard time promoting and hiring people of color to decision-making positions such as head coach and general manager?
You see a lot of turnover in this business. You know that better than anybody. And that's something that happens. What we need to do is continue the work on developing that pipeline, getting the right kind of coaches with the right kind of experience that teams want to hire as head coaches.
I hear the word pipeline. I've been following this for 35 years. I heard that it's like stepping back to the 80s.
I don't even understand what that means. I mean, I thought the whole point of the Rooney Rule was to try to replenish the so-called pipeline. Next thing I know, I look up and Norv Turner and his brother, his uncle, his cousin, his nephew, his dog are apparently getting hired to be coordinators at certain NFL football teams. I mean, this is just total corporate BS that does not speak to what the actual problem is here, which is that people do not want to give people who they don't know a chance, which in this case is directly related to the lines of race.
Because there's within that statement of we have to develop a better pipeline is the inference that the actual people who aren't getting hired are the reason for the problem to some degree.
That's exactly
because we see that in college basketball. We're like, how come more women aren't being hired? It's like, oh, well, they don't seem to exist. We can't, quote unquote, find them. And that to me is what the implication is in that statement, is like a blaming of them not existing or raising their hands high enough to be contending for some of these jobs.
So what changes that behavior? And the thing that Goodell doesn't want to address, it's as Jason Reed said in The Undefeated, draft pick penalties, high money penalties, that will change it. But what is Commissioner Goodell going to do about that? Is he going to tell the owners, hey, we got to do this in order to have
He's not the hire-fire guy, though.
That's right.
You got to say this about Roger Goodell. He really showed, I think, in the last several months in the negotiations with the Players Coalition, and we've seen some great reporting at The Undefeated of the schism in that players group. Imagine all the different 3 factions of owners he had to deal with, that he was able to bridge that gap. And $90 million is not an inconsequential amount of money, but he doesn't own a team.
That's true.
Right. But he's got a big hammer, but he's got to be authorized to use that hammer.
But when does he stop paying lip service to this and really do something with some teeth to change some behavior?
It comes down to numbers, and we can track the numbers. That word pipeline,
I got to update that.
Yeah. Let's move on to the big story. This morning in Charlotte, Michigan, at Larry Nassar's final sentencing hearing, the father of 3 of Nassar's survivors attempted to attack the former physician.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon. Would you do that?
That is not
yes
how
or no?
No, sir, I can't.
Would you give me 1 minute?
You know that I can't do that. That's not how our legal system works.
His name is Randall Margraves. 3 of his daughters in toto, 2 at this hearing, have spoken. Several hours later, he was back in court, and the judge, after receiving an apology, gave him no sentencing, no fine, no court costs at all. He said that he had heard things that his daughters said to the court they had never said before in preparing to talk about this case. That in a moment I'm shocked we haven't seen an incident like that already.
It's the real world impact of what Larry Nassar did and why a lot of his enablers need to be watching carefully what's happening here. You know, this is one of these circumstances. I think it's easy for people to step back and say, these people are affected. That is sad, but I can't really feel it myself. When you see what that dad goes through, that's why you realize these judges are letting everybody speak. There is so much to be said, so much pent-up frustration over what Nassar has done over all this time, that is why these forms are being presented. So what that man did, how can you say it's going to be anything otherwise when he heard what happened to his daughters? And you know what? That's what Nassar's life is going to be like.
Yeah, I think we've, even though we're only now not even yet removed, but we're a week removed from, say, Ali Raceman's statement, I think we tend to kind of put that retrospective look on it, where it's like a gold medalist took a stand and made change.
To take a stand to get people interested, too, frankly.
Exactly, and the kind of courage. And I think within that kind of broader story that we're going to start telling about this Nassar incident are the actual day-to-day people who have to go home and actually live with the reality of what happened. And when I watch that tape, that's what I see. I see a family that has just been completely torn apart by what happened, and I actually start to like feel it as opposed to have that removed look of like, what's the glossy storyline we put on this?
And to speak to that, their family, don't just look at the dad in that situation. Look at those 2 girls.
Yes.
See their reaction. You know, they weren't exactly smiling, but the judge had just gotten through telling them, you have each other. You have somewhat of a support system between the people that you're there with. And from the time that they're sort of realizing what they can do to come together, their father has a reaction that they cannot be proud of, but is still a part of that trauma in addition to them being victims of the situation. They have to deal with how everybody else is reacting around them. And I imagine that is extremely scary on top of what already happened. You can hear the sobs in the video, which is the most heartbreaking part about it to me.
One quick addition here is I had no clue the proximity to Nassar that these victims
physically.
Oh, yeah.
And I think over the 2 weeks, I just kind of imagined like he was maybe another 20 yards away. And then you see, I mean, he was 2 big steps away from Nassar. Just the simple proximity of delivering those statements, even over the course of the 150 plus we've seen, to me has now raised my attention that they were literally 8 yards away from him as they were giving those statements.
And you see his defense counsel, gentleman in the white shirt and the tie, stepping in as well, and officers of the court doing what they're so professionally well trained to do. You want to talk about the emotions raised. Obviously, we see that this morning. The comments made by one of the defense counsel for Larry Nassar yesterday at WWJ Radio, Shannon Smith. If you've not.
There is a huge part of me that does not believe that every one of those girls was victimized by him. I believe that what happened, while there may be some that were victimized and certainly a part of the plea agreement, there are others who have come to believe they were victimized because of the way the case spun in a way out of control.
She also said he comes off as a good guy. He did some good. He cured some patients when there's copious testimony that people were I don't know what planet this woman was orbiting.
Let me say, I'll say this as a lawyer. This is what gives lawyers bad names. This is why people think that lawyers are just people that chase money and will defend any cause they think is going to help themselves. Because you look at what she said, and look, I'm going to throw a couple things out there. First, you know, perhaps she made a mistake here. She spoke too stridently. She is a woman that her career is defending people like Larry Nassar, so she's taught to be a skeptic of claims. So I get all of that. She's had death threats. I get all of that. That might not be fair because she's, in a sense, doing her job. But the timing of this, first of all, you're listening to all these people pour their hearts out, and you're going to have the audacity to doubt their claims. Secondly, you have no idea what people have experienced because you're not them, and you haven't been listening to them. You've been listening to Nassar. You're defending his actions still. After everything that's happened, even Larry Nassar had to step out and disavow her comments.
Right. Yesterday afternoon. Yeah.
It's unbelievable to me that she would choose to say that at this time in that way, so disrespectful to these people who had to take all that strength just to stand up there and share their stories. And I'm telling you, I hope she realizes today that this is what gives lawyers a bad name. And I hope she's coming out with an apology because she needs to do so.
He pled guilty. That's all I need to know about whether or not this statement was necessary or not. You know, the guy admitted that what he did regarding child sex abuse and these crimes was something that he was willing to tell America that happened. At that point, I don't see any reason for a lawyer to defend him whatsoever.
The other prong of this, of course, Larry Nassar going through his final sentencing. This is in Charlotte, Michigan. Outside the lines reporting, as we talked about last week on this very program, with the resignation of Mark Hollis, the athletic director, followed 2 days before the university president resigning. Michigan State's handling of allegations of sexual assault against basketball and football players. And again, the two remaining major figures here in the story, and they have to answer questions about the Tom Izzo, Mark D'Antonio, neither choosing to answer questions.
Any accusations of my handling of any complaints of sexual assault individually are completely false.
I'm going to worry about our team. I'm going to worry about the survivors. And that's what I'm going to stick with right now. I'm sorry.
You understand folks have a lot of questions.
Yeah, probably.
Not giving many answers.
Nope, not going to right now. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
On Monday, when the special investigator, the independent prosecutor, gets his note in, his letter, demanding all sorts of emails and phone records in the Nassar case, the topic line says, and other matters, other issues. We don't know how wide his brief is going to be here.
Yeah, I think any of us at this table can technically understand why Izzo is responding that way. We understand the lawsuit implications. We can pull back and say, what upside is there? Because you have to protect not only the team he's created, but the athletic department. And yet, within understanding all of that, you can still say, this is exactly how we got to this place to begin with, is a preferring to protect of an institution rather than a personal accountability to speak openly. And I'm not saying that if I'm Tom Izzo, I'm able to speak openly given all of the constraints within that institution, but this is ironically exactly why we're in this position.
Well, the problem is it looks damning for him. The young man was living in his basement when all this stuff happened. He's essentially, he's essentially saying he doesn't know. You know what the problem here is? He can't be liked and at the same time say nothing.
The bottom line is that these two guys are going to have to step down on the simple fact that it's the right thing to do. You know, there's nothing wrong with admitting, there's nothing wrong with admitting this happened on our watch, and if we want to be a part of the solution, we've got to get out of the way of those trying to solve it.
Well, it is a university that has, for a number of years, and not just on these issues, stood accused of secrecy. And outside the lines, it took us several years in court to get some of this documentation to complete our reporting, and that's public record. Next up, villains, including your chance to catch one of our villains. And Kate is going to step up and defend a marsupial.
Absolutely. I'm in for that.
Are you into marsupial?
Marsupial. You remember that crazy?
Jack Link's Jerky presents Working Out with Sasquatch. Whether you're a casual exerciser or a football superhuman named Clay, if you're working out, you're looking for an edge.
Is it some new technology?
Is it using your brain muscles to visualize success?